three, or just tell us?
No, you're live now.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening and welcome to the final meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee, I guess, before the election. We're fairly shortly into the period of purdah. I'm Councillor Jeff Cand, who had the privilege of chairing the committee for about the last 12 months. Before we start, I'd like to explain, for the benefit of any members of the public who happen to be zooming in on the meeting, which councillors are present and where we're going to go next. In addition to myself, the other members of the committee in attendance are, unless I've got the absences wrong, Councillor Jeff Beck, Jeremy Cottam, who's my Deputy Chair, Vice Chair, Rick Jones, Tony Linden, Jeff Mays, Andy Moore, and B. Yoloko. We also have a parish council representative on the committee, Councillor Bill Graham, and an independent member, Simon Carey. Parish councillors and independent members are permitted to speak to the issues on the agenda, but they're not permitted to vote on the items. Also welcome to Joseph Holmes, Sarah Clark, Shannon Coleman-Slaughter and Judy Gillespie, who are the officers who will be advising the meeting and making some presentations. A couple of seconds, let me finish my spiel and I'll let you cut in. We also have David Johnson and Sophia Brown from Grant Thornton in attendance to talk about one of the issues on the agenda. Sadie Earn is in attendance as the clerk to the meeting, hiding at the back. And Lizzie Reeves is the Zoom host, who we've just heard say we've gone live. Standard procedure: if we hear an evacuation alarm, leave the building immediately via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by officers, as members are clearly incapable of finding exits themselves. Follow instructions given by the aforesaid trained officers and assemble outside the pub, the Dolphin Pub, across the road. Before I bring Adrian back in, I'd just like to say that this, I believe, is the final meeting for Councillor Jeff Beck, who has, according to the note I have, been on the Governance and Ethics Committee for 16 years. I mean, I had the privilege of helping Jeff back in 2019 at the last election, and he showed remarkable durability and commitment to his local community. And despite the fact that he's reached an age which most of us will be proud to reach, he's still absolutely committed and fully switched on to all the needs of the community he lives in, and has given dedicated service to this committee, which I think the council should and must be very appreciative of. So thank you, Jeff. Councillor Abs, although you promised me you weren't here as some sort of hand grenade throwing plant, you did put your hand up, so carry on. Have I missed something?
You said,
my apologies.
You said I was Jeff Mays and not Adrian Abs.
Okay,
That's a big Jeff Mays.
Oh,
but thank you.
I'm so sorry. Of course, I know that from regular meetings on the planning committee. Okay, have we received any apologies from the members who I've mentioned, other than the correction that we just had from?
We've had apologies from councillors David Marsh and David Southgate.
Fine, thank you. Okay, item 2, page 3 to 10, the minutes. Do we have anyone prepared to propose?
Chairman, I'm more than happy to propose both sets of minutes being a true record of what took place.
Councillor Beck and Councillor Cottam to second. I think you had your hand up first. So anyone got any comments on those minutes? Of course, thank you.
Yes, please. Sorry. In the first set of minutes for the October meeting, I think it is, my declaration of interest there at paragraph 26 hasn't quite come out right.
Right.
Could I suggest a slight alteration? In that first sentence there, it's actually West Berkshire and Newbury Liberal Democrats.
Okay.
And then if the second sentence could read, the matter was referred to that organisation which considered the West Berkshire Council was better placed, etc. So delete the word the groups, the words the groups and the bit in brackets. The point being that I was actually chair of the executive, and therefore I was as chair of the party, you chair the local party executive. So if it can be reworded the way I've just suggested, that will come out right. Thanks very much.
Of course, Councillor Moore, that's what you'd like. We take at the board.
Yeah, I'll make the amendment.
And with that amendment, and thank you for frankly correcting that, although we know you're your total integrity. I don't think anyone would hold it against you if it wasn't recorded, but now it has been. So thanks very much. We have a proposer and a seconder for the minutes in favour. Thank you very much. I think that's. Okay, you weren't at that first meeting. Fine, thank you. Sure, thank you. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, I didn't vote.
You didn't vote.
I abstained because I wasn't present at the meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Abs. I've missed you twice this evening. I'm sure it's not deliberate. I can assure you it's totally
Yes,
accidental.
I'll try and stay out.
It's my age. Anyway, thank you very much for that. Okay, so we've got the minutes through. Forward plan. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, Chairman, just in case it's discussed. I'm involved, well, I'm on the local government pension scheme for councillors, which is now no longer contributory since I think 2015. But as the interest was personal or any other registrable interest, but not a disclosure pecuniary interest, I'm determined to remain to take part in the debate and vote on the matter, just in case it's on the audit that we were discussing, the internal audit report, I believe it was. And it will also possibly come on the external audit as well. So
This
just
is-
in case that comes.
To do being part of the effectively the pension
yeah.
scheme which has expired.
Yeah.
Okay,
Where some you can't contribute to it anymore.
thanks for that, Tony. Okay, then on to the first item of substance, the internal audit update. Julie, if you'd like to introduce the report.
Thank you. Good evening. So this report is my update at the end of Q3. The highlights of it really are stated in 4.5, where I've mentioned there's no significant issues of concern identified for the period for the work that we've completed. But there's no corporate reviews with a less than satisfactory opinion, but there was one establishment visit that had a weak opinion. And then I've gone on to give an explanation for that weak opinion in section 5.2. So it was a resource centre, and the key areas where the improvement was needed was to do with the interest in the petty cash account and how it's administered, the amenities fund, which is like a private fund, and how that's managed and accounted for needed improving. And the catering arrangements, they just need improving and looking at testing the market and having a formal contract in place. So there's no significant issues. There's just a number of issues which pushed it into a weak opinion.
And is that it, Julie? Is that it?
And
Perhaps we could just hold the questions, if you don't mind, till Julie's finished the presentation.
so that was the main bit of the report on the update, and the list is used the usual list on Appendix A of completed work, Appendix B work in progress, and Appendix C is the an update on the fraud work plan. What I was wanting to go through today is at the last meeting, Councillor Southgate asked for some updates on timings of the audit work. So I did do quite a bit of work and that's laid out on Appendix D to actually show, because the query was, why is the outstanding work from 21-22? So in Appendix D, I've gone through that in detail. There were 7 audits. And out of those 7, I've mentioned that there was 4 that were actually out there in the service areas and have been for quite a while in a draft report, in which case most of it's outside our control. And there was 2 where I agree that we could have improved the timeframes, so they were more down to us. I've then gone on to give some more detail because I was asked to go back over a period of time. So I've gone back over the last 18 months. And I've given an analysis of timeframes for completion and I've broken them down between school visits because they're a different approach and they've got a different time frame than the corporate reviews. So I've laid that information out in Appendix D. And from that, my conclusion is there's not a big issue with the number of audits that aren't being completed in a reasonable time frame. And also, there's always contextual information needed to put into context because of the delays, where there can be delays, and we'll never totally get rid of them because we're a team of 4, well, 5, but to the moment 4, that if other work or other emergencies come out or new risks emerge, some of the assurance work is put on hold while we deal with the other stuff, and that leads to delays. It's constantly juggling and trying to deal with the risks as they occur, but also try to make sure that there aren't large delays. So it's a bit of a juggling act. But I'm happy to say that looking at those timeframes, to me, they look quite reasonable and not showing an issue. I've made a recommendation to committee. I'm saying that I could do this analysis every quarter, although it was quite time consuming, looking back and trying to identify what were the issues between the delays and actually the timeframes. My suggestion is, as part of my annual report, what I can do is identify those key ones where there's long delays and give explanations why, whether it's down to us, whether we could improve, whether it's down to the services not responding, or a bit of both. So more of an exception report rather than going through this detailed analysis every time, is my suggestion.
Sounds very reasonable. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. If I could just come in with 2, then I'll come straight back to you, Tony. Just a quick question on A and B, page 19, the Hungerford Resource Centre first. There's no indication of that you could establish of any fraud.
No,
Because I mean, things about impressed accounts I was worrying slightly because I think
no, this is our usual assurance work, assurance programs. Right. For fraud, that would have been a different piece of work and an investigation. This is our usual control elements that we do at establishments. Right. Like I said, there's no major areas of concern. It was just the sheer number of recommendations for improvement why it tipped it into weak.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes. So I'll start with the Hungerford Resource Centre. I presume you'll come back to eventually to us to explain that it's all been sorted out.
After 6 months after we finalise the report, we'll go back and visit, which I think is about April time. We'll go back and look at progress and come back to committee with that.
The other thing is on page 27, what's the NFI investigation work?
National Fraud Initiative, it's something that we're a legal requirement for us to provide data.
Yeah.
And we provide the data, it's across public bodies, it could be NHS as well as local authorities. They match data types like payroll to payroll. We get the matches back and then we are required to investigate them to see if if it's error or fraud. Okay, great. And the other question is, when are we advertising for the 5th person in your team? I'm going through HR with advice on how to word an advert to try and get people's attention. So yes, we are, but work in progress. Could be 6-9 months away, couldn't it? Well, hopefully not that long. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be at least a few more months. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions, if I may. One refers to your comments on timescales. I understand what you're saying, and I understand that the services are under pressure, and therefore there could be genuine delays rather than a desire not to engage. However, it's maybe a difficult question to answer. At what point, from a committee point of view, should we worry that what can be just a delay in an audit, which may not be serious, can turn into perhaps a governance risk if enough services didn't respond and it was long enough? When should we worry that there's actually a risk there?
I suppose that would be down to my opinion and raising it as an issue. I've mentioned earlier in the report that I'm aware that colleagues in other local authorities are having the same issue. COVID-19 caused some of the issues from people, their priorities changing, but also at the moment there are issues with resourcing in councils, and if they're just managing to keep the service going, us going in is an additional pressure. So what you're seeing there is where there's delays. What you don't necessarily see is where we've agreed to postpone. And there's quite a few that we agreed to postpone or carry forward them into next year, again, for the same sorts of issues. If I had concerns, I would raise it. It's been noticeable, the difference over the last 2 or 3 years, but I need to give my annual opinion in my report. So we need to do enough work in enough areas for me to feel comfortable that we're doing that. So if I didn't, I would be raising that concern with committee.
I'm sure we trust you on that one. The other question, just more curiosity really. There's a couple of planned audits or audits that are just started that we refer to strategy. And I'm just curious as to what approach you take to strategies like workforce strategy or environment strategy, where there isn't perhaps a legislative process that we have to follow to produce a strategy. I'm just curious as to how you approach that as an audit point of view.
Good question. It's the same as a policy. A policy is strategy. It's a case of what is the strategy policy trying to achieve? As in, you wanted to get somewhere. Have you identified what you want to achieve, where you want to get to? Have you clearly defined it? Is there somebody responsible having ownership for it? Have you got a time frame for it? And have you then broken down to how you're going to achieve it? And are you measuring it and monitoring it? They're the key ones.
Yeah, right. Standard measure.
Probably worth extending that question to Joseph, I think, because Joseph, in a general sense, it doesn't look like the internal audit team, in common with a lot of authorities, gets too involved in output measurements or value for money here. So that would be the case, isn't it? They're not evaluating the quality of the strategic judgments.
Well,
in a sense,
I think Julie seemed to do some advisory audits.
Yeah.
So I think certainly do get into some of those more sort of qualitative value judgments. I think as part of your audit, I think generally if internal audit have seen something and it's a relevant recommendation, your team put it in rather than sort of leave it alone and say, well, that was interesting, but maybe we'll pick it up another time. So there is that scope in there for adding that value.
Thanks, Simon. In a moment, I think Simon's had his hand up for a while, so I think it's your first major contribution.
One of my first. Basically, thank you, Julie. Thank you for the report. And you've mentioned Appendix D in quite a bit of length there. It's evident there's a number of issues with timeliness when it comes to audit reports being prepared. And I've got a couple of questions. First one's two questions in one, really. Why do you think managers are not giving enough credence to the audit process? Are they unaware of the importance of this governance aspect of the council's activities? And could this committee lend some weight to support the audit team in ensuring its targets are achieved? For example, do the priorities of the managers need to be addressed through training, policies, job descriptions, or even directions from above to ensure they're aware of the importance of these audits?
I don't think it is managers trying not thinking it's important or trying to dissuade us from doing the work, or I think it's a judgment call when we agree to either postpone or the information for the audit isn't coming timely. There's a judgment call as whether is it because they're sort of not wanting us in there, or is it more to do with the back to work pressures? And we ask for enough information to make about a judgment view on it. And if we just think it's, well, a case of they'd rather not do it at the moment, we would still try and push and do the audit work. And that is not usually what happens. It is at the moment more, they haven't got the people, they've got vacancies. So I would escalate if I was concerned that managers weren't taking it seriously. I've been here a long time and dealt with lots of different managers over the years, and you get a feel for whether somebody's not engaged with the process and you need to escalate, which I would do.
So you don't see it as too great a problem then, is that correct?
No, I don't believe it's a problem.
Just a second question. You mentioned that the audit team can be quite stretched at times through other duties of theirs. And would additional resources, this is a question I think it answers itself really, but would additional resources assist the audit team? I'm sure they would, and perhaps that is something this committee may also wish to investigate and take the matter up with relevant persons, be they officers or council members, with a view to increasing the resources, because it is an important team that you manage.
I won't say no to that, but going through the committee, is it 3 years ago, we did have the 5th post approved. So I've already raised that through the committee to have the 5th post approved. And I think the size of us is on a par with other unitary councils. The issue is if the work was just what's on the audit plan and the approved audit plan, we've got enough resource to do it. It's where investigations or other things that you can't plan for come out the woodwork. I'm assisting this year and last year with HR doing grievances and disciplinary investigation. So that's taken an awful lot of my time. It could be you can't plan for that. And then it's just a case of a balancing whether Joseph or Sarah Clark, my line manager, whether they're concerned enough that they'd want additional resourcing if I was taken, or there was other things going on, a big fraud investigation, for instance, and the team could take 2 or 3 of us auditing, investigating it, which would have an impact. And then it would be a case of determining whether do we want any sort of casual resourcing to assist. For those, and I think it would depend on the circumstance to and the impact it was having on our usual work.
Yeah, but you sound quite confident now that everything's running smoothly, or as smoothly as can be. Yeah.
Vacancy. If we get that post, if I have to carry that vacancy for a longer period of time, because it's since last June, then things might be a bit different. But if we have that post filled, I'm comfortable the resource level is reasonably right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. I think 20 years with the Audit Commission taught me that you can put any amount of resource into audit, actually, virtually, and it's a very, very difficult call for the 151 officer about balancing the cost as an overhead with the demographic circumstances of the council. You know, if you're surrounded with a very poor area and lots of crime and it might be more audit required, but it's a very fine balance. I get that. I get that. Tony.
Yeah, just to go further on that, I mean, Joseph Holmes is here. He's our 151 officer, Simon, and he's our chief financial officer. So he's in this meeting, and obviously he and Julia are aware of this, as well as Sarah, who's not here today. So obviously, you know, all these things are taken into account. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Moore.
I think my question has been answered in the previous thing, but it's by a relatively traditional question about your own staffing. I heard that you were carrying 1 vacancy in 5. Is that in the audit team?
Yes, there's a team of 5 and 1 vacancy since last June.
And you make a passing reference here in terms of this, you know, ability to delay, the ability to keep the programme going, about vacant posts, which I assume are in vacancies in the teams that you are auditing. How I mean, we're all of us aware that you know, there's a struggle with posts in particular areas as well. How significant do you judge that is to conducting your audit process?
It has been more noticeable over the last year or so. How significant, it depends what's on the audit plan to, you know, which ones have got, I'd say it's pockets of services, probably have got more, having more problems to recruit than others. And it's not across the board. So it is an issue, or it's more of an issue than I've noticed before, I can say, but to what degree, to what significance, yeah, that would be difficult to measure.
Thanks. Anyone else wanted to contribute?
Just a comment to basically complement the report. I think it's one of the easiest ones to read. That I know it's the same format, but somehow it seemed to read well. And also to say that I would personally support the suggestion made in 5.7.
Thank you for that. If you hadn't said that, I would have done. It's a well designed report, well written up. We're not required to vote on this report clearly, but we just need to be clear whether we want any more information on the completion of audits that was asked for last time, that's been reported on this time. If you want to know anything further, are we happy that that's given us a suitable summary of where those audits have got to? No response. I guess no one has any further queries. Yeah. Fine, thank you. Let's move on then to, if we may, to page 33 to 58, which is the external audit plan. And even worse, the fee for the financial year, which I don't suppose has gone down between years, frankly. No. Right. So, who is due to introduce the report? Sharon? Sophie Brown. Okay, right, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who I've not met, and I think that's most of you, I'm replacing Ian Murray as the key audit partner on the 21-22 financial statements audit onwards. I'll let David update you on what's happening with 2021 in a moment, and that audit will be signed off by one of the partners in our team, Paul Dossett. Just a bit about me, for those of you who don't know me, I trained with the Audit Commission and transferred to Grant Thornton 10 years ago. And all of my career has been in public sector audit. So I work for local government authorities and also the NHS. I'll just pass you over to David quickly to update on 2021.
I remember Paul Dossett from the Audit Commission myself, but I don't, it's not a declare all interest, is it? I mean, I'm not sure actually now I think about it, that we have a sort of overlap vaguely in that you probably joined the Audit Commission way after I left, but okay, fine, carry on, David.
Thank you, Sophia. So members will be aware that 2021 is still outstanding in terms of getting that signed off. We are making progress and we continue to have conversations with Joseph and his team. As members will potentially be aware, there was an issue with infrastructure assets, which West Berkshire was caught under. That has now been solved in terms of the statutory manner in which that has to be reported in the accounts. However, there is still an element of work that needs to be done within that, which is currently being resolved and has caused some further issues that we need to make sure that we, as the auditors, are happy with before we will sign off the accounts. Members will also be aware from previous audit findings reports that we do identify a number of material misstatements in the accounts, which all take time to work through. But I do want to provide assurance that we are now getting to, later than we ideally would want, later than anybody would want. We are now getting to a point where those accounts are getting to the point where they can be signed. Once this infrastructure asset issue has been finalised, then it is for us to finalise the file and provide the opinion.
Thank you. Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also involved in the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority accounts, which is done by different auditors. One of our, I'm going to mention something else later on in the report on page 73, but on this bit, we have been delayed yet again, as we do on several occasions, with the pensions account, which is the Berkshire Pension Scheme, which is run by the Royal Berkshire of Windsor, the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And certainly I raised it at the Fire Authority meeting, which had the Chief Fire Officer there and senior officers there of the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, and suggested, I don't know if they did it or not, that they let the Secretary of State know, Michael Gove, who's responsible for local government, as well as the fire service as well on a general basis. I know the Home Office look after it more generally and its investigations on that. But it is something that is a problem which we've had for several years. And I think it would be important that this council also make it aware, Chairman, that the Secretary of State has informed that the reasons why we are late in many of the unitary, well, all these 6 unitary councils, and also the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, is because of the delays in the pension accounts, which is on several years by the Royal Berkshire of Windsor and Maidenhead, that is alert to this problem, Chairman. Maybe, David, you can make a comment on that. Sophie.
I can't comment, obviously, on the pension fund audit because that is not our audit and it's not within our gift to make comment either way in terms of how that's done. I think, though, it is reflective of an audit market that, or an audit market that is broken. But again, I can understand members' frustrations, but again, it's not for us to pass comment. And if members are happy to send comments to the Secretary of State, that's for them to decide.
Happy with that. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I might be off base here, but I first started seeing on page 38, and I think you alluded to it, the valuation of the land constantly being reassessed as a risk. In business, if I have a set of properties and they're really reevaluated and have a net gain on that evaluation, it also creates a liability. Is that buried in here somewhere, or is just council property not work the same way, or council portfolios not work the same way?
So it's not quite the same in terms of the property portfolio, and maybe Joseph can correct me if I go wildly off topic, which potentially could happen. The bottom line is the valuation in terms of the property valuation doesn't impact the accounts in terms of the income and expenditure position. It is a balance sheet entry with the valuations written off to or put into unusable reserves. There is more an issue in terms of, I suppose the work that we do is looking at the assumptions and the information that goes into the accounts and the valuations that are on there. These are not properties being held for disposal or for gain in valuation. They are majoritatively operational buildings that the council operate their services out of. So I think in answer to your question, no, I don't think it hides a liability within the accounts. The issues that we are having around the valuation are more, I would say, more administrative rather than the actual valuation of them.
Okay, thank you. Joseph, maybe you could fill me in on what the difference is separate to this meeting then, because clearly I'm not understanding.
That's fine, Councillor Abs.
Sorry, yeah, Tony.
Yeah, just a separate point which I was going to raise. I know we've got the risks given out by yourselves, which is a similar package I've seen by the Fire Authority internal auditors. They use it externally, provider, and of course their auditors as well. But I think one major area which has certainly been alerted, that I've always been alerted since I've been in local government as a councillor, out of my nearly 35 years, when I started in 1983. I got kicked off the council for about 5 years courtesy of the electorate, which they're perfectly entitled to do. We're in a democracy. But is the risk on planning in terms of under the 2010 Bribery Act for corruption. And that is a significant problem. I know we have internal measures to deal with it, but that is significant in terms of planning applications for a local authority and the local plans. And that is a significant risk in the whole of local government as such. I've got no concerns at the moment, but it's something we have to be aware of, I think. And I don't know if you wish to make a comment on that, but that is a significant risk on a continual basis.
Yeah, so in terms of planning and planning applications and the probity of those transactions, that is probably more within the gift of internal audit to have a look at how that process is run. There is potentially at the fringes of our value for money through the governance process, if any of that sort of comes in at the edges. But whilst I understand your concern around that and don't disagree, it's probably not something that we would get involved in.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks. A couple of questions for me on, I think the numbers have got slightly.
Shall I present the report and then I'll take questions?
On?
Shall I present the plan to you? Because I just introduced David to speak about 20.
I thought you had to read it ourselves. Oh,
No,
yeah,
that's
good.
fine.
Sure, of course, yes.
So,
You made that clear.
No, sorry. So I will take the report as read, and I think just point you to page 36 of the pack, which has the headlines. In terms of significant risks, we don't have any change to the significant risks that were identified for the prior year. So we have a rebutted risk around revenue. We have management override of controls, the valuation of land and buildings and investment properties, and also the valuation of the net pension fund liability. On pages, let me just find the page. Page 41, we also highlight what we call other risks, so not significant risks, but around expenditure recognition and accounting for grants, revenue and expenditure. We set out there what we identify the risk to be, that it's not significant, but also the planned response to those two other risks. Going back to page 36, in relation to materiality, it's slightly higher than it was in the prior year. So we have planning materiality of 5.8 million. And we will report to you any errors or issues that we find at the trivial level, which is 291,000. Later on in the report, there's a detailed slide around the value for money work that we will do for 21-22. And at this stage, we haven't identified any risks of significant weakness where we might need to do any further risk-based work. In audit logistics, apologies there, we spotted the error with the audit fee. It's not over £1 million, it's 117,000, which is slightly down on the prior year audit fee. And then David and I just also identified another error in the plan, which is an erroneous page on page 40. It's a duplicate page which picks up the significant risks that we've already highlighted prior to that. So apologies, but I will pause there and then take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Oh, thanks. That's a nice succinct summary. Well, if I could just turn you for a moment to, if I ask my colleagues, to your page 16, our page, sorry, your page 18, our page 50, audit fees. And focus on that just for a moment. I noticed that, could you just give us a bit more background to the 20% increase in fees that's occurred between years? 80,000 place, an extra £17,000 fee.
So the £80,000 there is the scale fee, which is reported by PSAA. There are various factors that in that fee that aren't captured. So the extra work that we need to do in relation to revised ISAs and also work that we have to do to address FRC requirements. So that's a lot of extra work around property, plant and equipment revaluation, investment property revaluation, and the pension liability work. So that wouldn't have been included when the scale fee was set.
Okay. And the second question, before I turn to my colleagues, the value for money work at £19,000 in that list. Can you give us a better feel for what exactly you might be looking at, or what Joseph's agreed you'll be looking at? Because I see that you say on page 48 that you haven't identified any risks of significant weakness from initial planning. And I think I suppose I'm most interested in with my history looking across that is that there's two techie bits that aren't there, ensuring the body can deliver services and also effectively setting the budget and all that sort of stuff. But the one on the left, arrangements for improving the way the body delivers its services, costs and efficiencies and that sort of stuff, and whether efficiency gains are tracked and monitored and all that sort of stuff doesn't seem to be mentioned here. Is that something that you've got on your list of things to do?
Yeah, so with the new scope that was introduced with the code in 2020, our work on value for money is a lot wider than what it was a couple of years ago. So in those three areas of financial sustainability, governance, and the 3Es, we go into quite a lot of detail. We look at the arrangements in place for the council. We do benchmarking to see how your arrangements are against similar counterparties. We also would look at outputs as well. So it goes into quite a lot of detail. And if we did identify significant risks or significant weaknesses, that required further risk-based work, at that point, we would inform the council of what fee we would be expecting for that additional work. So the fee set out on page 18 is the base fee to cover the detailed work in these 3 areas.
Okay. But
It also involves, quite a lot of meetings, interviews with officers in the council, document review also.
I'm presuming, Joseph, you subject that to fairly rigorous review. Bear in mind, it's another cost increase.
Well,
Make sure you look content.
well, yes, Chairman, to an extent, it is kind of set through this committee and set out by GT and through the Financial Reporting Council.
Yes.
So there is a limit to, it's not set or procured by us per se.
Yeah, get that. Fine. Anyone else?
2 questions, if I may, one for Sophie and one for David. Is there any likelihood of a significant delay to the 21-22 process, as there has been for the previous one, given that some of the significant risks appear to be the same?
So we're very much underway with our field work for the audit of the 21-22 financial statements work. We've updated Joseph on where we are in terms of sample testing. So most of our samples are out. There are areas where we need to reconcile things with officers to make sure that we're happy with the samples before we select them, because we want to make sure that things go out and they're right first time. We have identified an issue in relation to some of the property valuations, where the council's engaging the valuer to look at a number of assets and revalue them because they haven't been valued as we would have expected. So work is ongoing and will be ongoing until the end of next month. And at that point, we'll take stock and see where we are, and again update Joseph as to progress with the audit.
Okay, thank you. Given what you said about the issues surrounding the sign-off of the 2021 accounts, from a committee member's point of view, should we be worried about any governance issue connected with that, or is it simply technical process at this stage?
It's a good question. I think just to provide assurance, as an internal process where we identify a number of areas in these sort of areas, we have what we call a panel process, where that makes it sound more complicated than it is, but it's just a panel process where we present these issues to independent people within the firm to get a feel of whether these are symptomatic of, as you would say, a wider issue, or whether they are just one-off errors. The audit team, our team's sort of view was that it was just individual errors in terms of the calculation, and that was agreed with by the panel. So from that point of view, we're satisfied it's not what you would call an endemic issue that's causing a number of mistakes. It is just one-off individual errors that we're picking up as part of the process.
Great, thank you. That's reassuring. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Then it's Adrian.
Okay, and then you've got, yeah. Thanks, Chairman. I'm going to ask Joseph on the point I raised earlier, which is delays due to the Royal Borough of Maidenhead, or Windsor of Maidenhead, and whether we should, because this has been going on for several years in all authorities and the fire service as well, from the Berkshire Pension Fund, whether it might be useful just to alert the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities that this is a perennial problem.
I suppose so. Yeah, Chairman, through you. We did have a letter from the department actually at the end of last week, encouraging both audit firms and audited bodies to ensure their accounts are closed ASAP. So I think it's certainly an issue that central government are looking at closely, and having a look at whose accounts still haven't been signed off, going back to 1819 for some authorities, 1920 and 2021. So it's certainly an issue DLUC are aware of. How many tools they have to push that on is a different point. But certainly with my colleagues as well, we meet regularly with colleagues from across Berkshire, and set out how important it is to speed along the pension fund audit.
But are they aware that the problem is with the local council rather than just the auditors?
I cannot comment if you know which side it is. I think if you look at nationally, I'm sure Sophia or David correct me on this, but I think, for example, even 2021-22 audits, I think only 12% have been certified so far. And there's a sizable minority still not completed for 2021 and quite a number still not for 1920. So I can't talk about the specifics of the pension fund itself. There is clearly an issue within the system that audits are taking a long time to complete.
Because I was aware of this pre-COVID through being on a committee-based system at the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority. So do you think it might be useful just to let the department know that there is a problem with our pensions through the people who are doing the work on that council?
I think if I could just interject briefly, Joseph, I think for me, having seen this stuff in the past, the test for me would be whether the external auditors, but sometimes our internal auditors, feel there is a sinister reason for a delay in accounts being.
I think it's sinister. I just think it's
just what I'm trying to say to you. If there was any doubt at all that if it was, for example, some massive delay because of huge property investment, like in Spelthorne, I'd be very concerned indeed about delays. But I guess the external auditors would have a view if there was a material delay by another authority, and in their report, I suppose they'll reflect on their final report on the audit. They'll reflect on the fact that delays were incurred because of the actions of a third party. So, and I guess that would draw it to the attention by the fact those are on deposit. To the, as you just described, with the department levelling up. So I think it'll get to it that way. I'm sure everyone's aware of it, aren't they?
Are they, Joseph? Are they the government aware of that or not?
Well,
I don't know. I can't answer on behalf of.
But they probably are.
Do you think it might be just useful just to, when you get a further letter, just to explain that?
I'm sure Joseph gives the 151 officer Baydale a prod when you get together with the other 151 officers and say, you know, it's holding everybody up.
Or the government,
must be terribly irritating. Adrian, you were next, then B, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Sophie, you mentioned the assets being reevaluated and that's being looked at again. But what you didn't say is the size of the portfolio that's having to be reassessed.
It's about 60 million, isn't it? If you talk about the investment.
Well, that's the whole portfolio, isn't it? 68 million or something.
Investments.
Yeah. So, but what portion of that is under investigation?
So the value of assets revalued for 21-22 would be 20%. It's a rolling 5-year program. I think we have identified circa 100 assets that don't seem to have been captured when we would have expected them to be. So those are the assets, individual assets that have gone back to the valuer.
100 out of.
Joseph?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I can't say off the top of my head. I don't know what the.
Well, could you come back to us with
I can come back to you. And I can't say either what GAT are testing, but if you think of the number of assets that we have around open spaces, bits of highway, it will be into the many hundreds. So I'm
just curious. You know, is it if it's 20% and that's the normal portion that we're looking at to reevaluate? That sounds quite normal. If there's anything outside there, if it's 20%, but it's the biggest assets within the portfolio that's causing concern. That's actually a much different thing, because it's a big number. So it's just lack of the data, the actual numbers that I'm querying there.
If I could just offer a sort of a potential, as I, from my experience as an auditor, external auditor, the accounts of any authority, unless there's something sinister going on behind it, are very much delayed. So it's only a point in time, some time ago, and the assets of the authority. Personally, if I was given the choice, I'd waive the authority's need to value them, because actually there's no real nothing to be gained. Valuing assets owned by a company on its balance sheet, of course, is worthwhile, because you know what the company's worth. But other than commercial assets owned by the authority, which they may wish to trade or sell, for me, the valuation of the fixed assets owned by the authority, because that's what they are, they're long going. It needs to be done. I get that, but I don't think it needs to concern us particularly. that they haven't got a completely up-to-date valuation on some of the assets. It's just to sort of get on with it when you can.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood. So if Sophie, you were referring to the fixed assets of the council, nothing more.
Yes.
That's fine. Then.
Yeah, it's just schools and stuff and bits and pieces. So it's all like that. B, and I hope that you haven't spotted anything relating to zero-based budgeting in this analysis.
No, thank you, Chair. I think I just need a bit more clarification on these accounting estimates and related disclosures. Excuse me, because it places some requirements, and this is a new introduction, I believe, and there's some requirements on the governance and ethics committees, particularly around understanding how estimates have been arrived at, the models. It's page 42, and perhaps you could shed more light on that. And also vis-a-vis the valuation of land, valuation, not investment properties, the valuation of land and buildings, the rolling revaluation. Again, I think this has to be done every year. And given the sort of the current climate around valuation, and you can have significant movements. So what is your expectation from the accounting estimates related disclosures? Firstly, as a subject matter, I mean, what should we, because you're going to assess us. I mean, what that says is you're going to assess our capability to supervise estimates and disclosures, and you're going to do some work on that. And then in relation to valuation of land, and not just land, really, all those other areas where you have estimates. And my third question is, is around your fees. Perhaps you could give us an idea of how you arrived at that, because the audit and logistics team just has two of you in it. So I just wondered if there are more people in the team, what's the mix of the team, and really just how you arrived at the numbers.
I think the trainee who does all the work's probably gone to bed by now.
It's not in there. So just to give a sense of, if it's all the trainees and then you've put a hefty margin on it. Not that you do that.
Thank you. So first of all, I think on page 42 of the pack, if we look at the questions at the bottom about what specifically members of this committee do, those bullet points are captured in relation to item 7 on the agenda. So within the informing the audit risk assessment document, there are specific pages around accounting estimates, and it will pick up the significant accounting estimates which are over the page on page 43. So valuation of land and buildings and investment properties, the valuation of the pension fund liabilities, depreciation, year-end provisions and accruals, credit loss, impairment allowances, and fair value estimates. So management's responses to those inquiries or those areas of estimate are set out there. So our expectation would be for members to review the management's responses and raise any comments or queries to challenge those processes or the models used. So that's what we would expect of members around the table, to be asking questions of how have you arrived at this estimate? Have you considered any other models or ways of estimating this area? In relation to the land and buildings valuation, so yes, there's a rolling 5-year program where circa 20% every year is valued. As you mentioned, each year there can be significant volatility in the areas that aren't valued. So what we ask of management is that there is an assessment of looking at the areas that haven't been valued and what that movement might be, and if it is material, maybe getting the valuer in to look at those areas. We also then do our own assessment of what we think the movement has been for those assets that weren't revalued during the year. And that brings up a lot of discussion between us, management, the valuer, in terms of what assumptions we're looking at and how we can arrive at a position where we're happy that there isn't a material difference, or if there is, that further work is being done by the council or its valuers to address those differences. Forgive me, I've forgotten the third area. Oh, fees. Okay, So in terms of the fees, it's not just David and I on the team. There's an in charge below us, so she's the audit senior, and then there are a team of trainees below that, all at different grades. Some more experienced than others, as you would expect in a training firm. At the moment, we've probably got 5 people below David and I. So there is a significant amount of resource going in, and at the moment there's lots of field work happening. I think in terms of the fee that we set, the scale fee has the add-ons that you see in terms of the work that we need to do around the additional requirements for the ISAs, and also the additional work that we need to do for all the value areas of valuation or estimates. And I think that factors in who's doing the work and how we make sure that we are addressing those areas to the required audit quality standards.
Are you able to come back with the schedule of all those people that you talked about? Yeah, I mean, because I think that would just give us a flavor of how you arrived at the figures. Now, thank you for that. It's just to close out on this accounting estimate and related disclosures, because I see a lot of work in this area, and there are, I don't know how many accountants are members of the governance and ethics, or whether there's a requirement for accountants to be members of governance and ethics, given that this is a reporting standard that needs to be complied with, and the requirements are accounting requirements. So perhaps this is a question for Joseph. So what work, I mean, how do we ensure that the governance and ethics are properly trained or even capable to be able to understand some of these really technical areas? Because this is a new requirement, as I understand it.
Yeah, I think actually that's a really good question. We are coming on to that as a specific issue with Joseph later on, actually. So yeah, he'll give you an explanation then, I think, if you can be patient around that. Anyone else from the membership want to raise a question? A quick question for Simon from me, actually. Simon, as our independent member, I should ask you if you have any observations on this this external audit programme yourself.
Not so far, Chair. It's quite a comprehensive document. I have scanned it a couple of times and I've read the salient parts of it. Coming in sort of fresh to this actual sort of part of the process, it's difficult to sort of dive in any deeper than just sort of the surface at the moment. But I'm really happy with the sort of level of questioning and challenging that it's actually going on.
Thank you for that.
Just one comment. The item 7 on the agenda, which produces the document that Sophie referred to, I think it's the first time I've seen it, and
this is the next item. Yeah,
I think, I don't know, are we just discussing it?
Yeah, we're going to have it. Sorry, we're going to have it pitched in.
A bit premature.
It's next.
I found it very, very useful.
I know the pubs will be open when you leave. I promise.
So I'm not trying to rush through. I didn't know whether 6 and 7 were actually being.
I think we're
the same, but
one follows the other. Yeah. So if you just be patient,
it's very useful.
Fine, no problem. And one final thing, just a reassurance that you didn't mention there could be additional fees arising from work, and presumably if those are put to Joseph, they'll come back to this committee case by case. Okay. Anyone else got any observations? Again, we don't have to vote on this. We can just move on. If you've got no more questions, we'll then move on exactly as you described to item 7, which is informing the risk assessment, which is again quite a lengthy document, and that's Sophia again, isn't it?
So technically this would be management's document because they're management's responses to our questions. So we sent this document to Joseph and his team, setting out all of the questions on the left-hand side, and management's responses against each of those questions are on the right-hand side. So I think if members would like to look at those management responses and ask any questions they have on those responses or add any comments, then we can note those as part of our planning processes for the 21-22 work. Thank you.
Has anyone who's gone through this, I know we've all leafed through it, got any particular issues arising out of the management responses to any of the questions? It's extraordinarily comprehensive, I know that. Councillor Moore.
I was just interested in to question 10. We get a list of the councils instructed by the council, and that covers areas. But for example, I wasn't quite clear where. I think in this period wasn't there an instruction in relation to the London Road Industrial Estate, and which of those areas would that then fall under? I mean, I didn't follow that very closely. I suppose actually, if we remembered who the council was, we'd know where they were listed.
21, 22. I'm not entirely sure we did. I don't think. A few years previously, yes, I would have thought so, but I don't think. But I can follow that up, so I can give you a proper answer, Councillor.
Okay, fine. Anyone else? Okay, well, I think you just have to trust Joseph or the Excel auditors to press on with that one. Okay, I think that's the Excel auditors slot, isn't it? You've probably got long journeys back to somewhere. You're near, are you? That's a good thing. So thank you very much for coming and for being patient with all the questions you put to both you and David. And we'll let you go. Thank you. Right. Audit Committee guidance, page 91 to 102. And this is you.
Right. Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this is a report on the basis of a SIPFA document, which is published in the Part 2 section. So it's not a particularly sensitive document, but it's their kind of intellectual property. So that's why it's not in the public domain, but it gives a summary, hopefully, here, where SIPFA have looked at what they think the audit committee remit should be. So picking up on Councillor Aloko's question in the previous paper around skills and training and remit, etc. This is sort of some of the views that SIPFA has expressed. Some interesting pieces there, and there's been a lot of work done as part of something called the Redmond Review. So Tony Redmond was asked by the government to have a look at the local audit sort of regime, picking up some of the points earlier about sort of late audit opinions, and also asked to sort of summarise. So it plays into that reform of having a look at how audit committees work. So put their view here, some interesting points. So for example, the suggestion that it should be, say, full council which approves the financial statements, and that shouldn't be delegated. I've got a view on that. And also picking up some of the points around having more independent persons on this committee. So we have an independent person online at the moment who is someone who's joined us recently to help comply with that best practice. I think they point to other parts of the UK where the audit committees potentially dominated by independent people rather than members of the authority, which sort of is an interesting position there as well. There's lots in here, but before this committee sort of finished in this municipal year, given the experience we've got around the table, I just wanted, my recommendation was to run an informal workshop in the next few weeks, just for sort of 45 minutes, an hour with you to get your thoughts on how the committee functions in light of this report. Just thinking in the new municipal year, not all members will necessarily be on this committee, and so it didn't really seem right to say to whoever will be on this committee, well, what do you think of the audit committee, when lots of the members could be brand new. So wanted to sort of get your views, given that many of you got lots of experiences around this, so we're not just starting afresh with this, but lots of interesting ideas in here. I said, got my own sort of thoughts on when there's sort of positives and not on this, but happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. I don't know who, I don't know who you reported. Fine.
Yeah, I just thought I would, yes. Yes, looking at that Redmond review, comments that Joseph had made, I think we can go into depth as a committee and as a scrutiny committee, where at full council, you know, you've got to support the ruling group, there's discipline and all the rest of it. They don't want you to rock the boat. And I'm talking about this council and other councils as well. I mean, I don't have experience, of course, of other councils, other than obviously attendance at my parish council. But it is something that full council operates totally different to a scrutiny committee, whether it's the scrutiny committee or I've used scrutiny management committee, as we call it at the moment, or governance and ethics and audit and governance, which is going to be called. And that's why I think it's important that people who've got this sort of experience deal with it than a more generous approach at full council, where things are rigidly controlled and you have to show that you're online and supporting everything. And if you make something critical, people go berserk over it. So I think, to be honest with you, you're better off having a specific scrutiny committee to doing that work. And I think it is right that we do have some discussions with the older members, because we're going to find, I'm certain about it, after May, you're going to have an awful lot of new people who won't have a clue, and it takes years to start understanding what's going on. I'm still learning after 35 years. So that's why I just put my tuppence in, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, a couple of things. I agree with Joseph. I think it would be a sensible idea. I found that the guidance quite useful, just to remind us what we should be doing and what skills we should have and so on.
Yeah.
I remember, I think over the last 2 years, we've discussed internally and with Julie, the training for members, and we've had some of that. But there is always never enough, particularly for those that aren't accountants or financially careered by profession. Like you, I think, I mean, we don't follow quite the recommendations. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that SIPFA want to focus an audit committee entirely on audit, but we're not called an audit committee. We have a slightly wider brief, and that's not necessarily a problem. So yes, it would be useful to have that discussion. So I think it's an exercise worth doing. And I see there's reference to a self-assessment as well in the recommendation. So would you want us to try and complete that before we got together as a workshop or?
Yeah, I think through you, Mr. Chairman, I think, yeah, ideally, just I would have a look through that self-assessment, and then at the workshop, I'll try and use some of that self-assessment to guide some of the discussion to get your thoughts out on the table through that.
Jeremy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think to take this to a full council would be pointless. There's just not enough time to give a thorough investigation with this. I think the cabinet system precludes it. Personally, I think you'd be getting a better overview if you had the committee system, which was here, and then you could go through each committee meeting and address them individually. Otherwise, it really has to come to a body like this. There just is not any time on a full council meeting to actually address this in any shape or form.
Okay. Can I just extract from the recommendations what needs to happen next if we accept the proposal, which seems to be the case, that we generally agree that we'll pass on our collective wisdom to our successors, or maybe to some of us who are still here plus our successors. We need a timetable for the completion of self-assessment. Ish.
Yeah, so I think, Chairman, if we could just go through Sadie, just to ask that a meeting get put in the diary in the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks, the sort of an hour or so, and for members to have a look through the SIPFA report and the self-assessment, and we'll use that to guide the discussion.
So you send us individually, Sadie, all the copy of the self-assessment. with a prompt, text an email, or do we have to pick it out of here, do we?
Where is it?
It's in the private appendices.
Yes, it is in there. And is this going?
Oh, 10.
You look at item 10 on the agenda.
Oh, right, okay.
Oh, yeah, right. Back of that is the services.
And is it in a user-friendly form? Because it's, yeah, but I mean, if it's not in the right form, can we actually do stuff to it? Or do we find ourselves struggling with it?
I think there might be a user-friendly form that we can just whiz around with.
It'd be really much
invite.
easier. I think we had one that we could just fill it in. So you know what these things like, you know, if it's in a particular format, we find we can't fill the boxes in, and we have to try and convert it into Word, and there's a lot of messing about. So it's easy if we get the same one. Is it a secret shopper thing that comes out anonymously, or do we send our names back saying this is it before you consolidate it? That's what I mean. Like
if you try and complete it or at least look at it before the meeting, I'll then consolidate all your responses, because I wouldn't mind having the debate and then try and pull that together.
So hold on a second, so let's get the time. Let's get this right. We'll get an email with a version that's attached, a simple thing, just the attachment, and not the full report, which just says here's your questionnaire, and a date on that email that tells us when we've got to get it back by, and then a date that we've got to put in our diaries to meet and discuss with Joseph the consolidated outcome from that. Does that seem the right way forward? Everyone happy with that? Tony?
Yeah, just Chairman, point of explanation. Are we coming to meet you, or are we doing it online, Joseph? I'm quite happy to come in because I'm lonely.
We do it hybrid, so yeah, I'm sure.
I don't mind either. I'll come in. I'm further away probably.
I would prefer to be here. Then I can print it off like Councillor Rick Jones, and then we can give it to you on.
I'm happy to meet you. I'm from Woking, so I'm the furthest away. I'm happy to come in. And B, presumably, isn't too unhappy, although you're next furthest away, I think.
I'm a hybrid man. I'm a modern man, so I believe in hybrid. Quick question, a quick comment really on this I don't know if we're going to come to it, but the first few questions I referred to an audit committee. So how do you answer that? Because
that's integrated with this committee effectively. I asked that question when I first arrived on the committee. Where's the audit committee? This is it.
It says have a dedicated. They use the word dedicated.
So I think through you, Chairman, that's the purpose of the workshop. So what SIPFA are saying is a narrower remit of this committee to be called just an audit committee. So drop out lots of other things that you look at, and you shouldn't have any kind of approval abilities. And that's the function of the audit committee. My view would be, I think having that wider remit gives you more information, which helps when we're looking at the annual governance statement, for instance, to pull in what else might be happening in the council. And I wouldn't disagree with some of the comments from other members around the accounts being approved at full council being an issue, because if you look at the thrust of this paper, it's saying, you know, if the paper is saying the audit committee becomes more knowledgeable about the financial statements, well, why wouldn't you then ask this committee to approve things? Because you've had more of the training and more of the understanding of the complexities. So it would be in more of a you know, says about being apolitical, about being in that place of looking and assessing the risks and governance here. So I think it's an interesting paper. So it puts out lots of, you know, good questions for us to consider which way may be better or worse.
No, it's guidance, isn't it? It's not legislation, and it's from a committee, from a group that is purely about accountancy. So they're bound to say that, aren't they?
Tony, you got something?
Yeah, can I have just point of explanation? Because I know in the Council Bridgman's constitution, I'm being a bit anyway, that we're going to change our name to the governance committee, well, that's what he's proposed. Are you suggesting we have a separate audit committee as well, or is it going to be part of governance, Joseph? Because I'm just getting a bit confused.
Okay. So we always have to have a committee which functions as those charged with governance, David would probably tell us. And, you know, that is this committee here. It can be an audit committee, it can be a governance committee. You can call it to an extent what you like. But David has to report somewhere to those charged with governance. That could be full council. I don't know if you have any other councils go for full council, don't know. So most councils will say those charged with governance is delegated down to a committee like this. And it often has the words audit, governance, ethics contained within it.
So basically all three would come under the provision of the governance committee.
I think what we probably need to do with this one is postpone it until we fill the questionnaire in and had this workshop, and then we can come more clearly down to what we'd like to do.
You can tick it online as well.
Yeah.
I've tested it.
Yeah.
You can tick it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's even easier. Okay. Can we come to order, please, gentlemen? Can we come to order, please? Excuse me. It's a subcommittee there. I know that. Forgive me. I just want to get through this. So what we need to do now, we need to vote on recommendations in 2.1 and 2 as modified by the proposal we have, which we've already suggested, that we have a timetable, an email, a consolidation and date set for a workshop to reflect on all of our feedback around how we see this working. Is that okay? Thank you very much. And Tony to second. In favour? Wholehearted agreement. Oh, Adrian, you haven't abstained. It's slightly disappointing, but thank you. Yes, that's fine.
Actively listened to the whole conversation, so I felt able to vote on it. Thank you very much. I'm not sure why I'd abstain.
Your contribution is always valuable. Okay, now we've got the final item, but Joseph asked that he has things to talk about relating to governance ethics and audit committees and stuff in part 2 to exclude the public.
Don't need to.
We've done it now, have we?
I think if
Nothing
you're,
else.
if you're
Yeah,
happy
I
to
was happy with that. I
discuss-
just wondered if there's any further he wants to.
No, it's just-
Okay, in that case, that's fine. That's concluded our business for the evening, I think, unless anyone's got anything else to say. Well, it's transparent. Transparency is good. And thank you very much. Thanks for being so patient with me for the last 12 months. Good luck, everyone who's going for election. And I'll look with interest to see what happens after May the 4th. And thank you very much.